History is a series of choices, battles, and pivotal moments that have shaped our world. But what if one of the most crucial conflicts in the history had ended differently? What if the Axis power led by Nazi Germany had won the Second World War? How would our world look today? In this exploration of an alternate timeline, we will journey into a world where the Third Reich triumphed, changing the course of history forever. From the immediate aftermath to the long-term global impact, we will uncover the chilling possibilities of a world dominated by the Axis power. To envision this alternate reality, we must first understand how the war could have turned in favor of the Axis power. Several critical moments could have dramatically altered the outcome. Imagine a world where the Luftwaffe had succeeded in the Battle of Britain, destroying the Royal Air Force and paving the way for Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of the UK. With Britain under Nazi control, the Allies would lose a vital stronghold. Or consider the Eastern Front. If the German army had captured Moscow during Operation Barbarossa, the Soviet Union might have crumbled, leading to a German victory in the East. Without the Soviet Union's resistance, the Nazis would have been free to shift their focus entirely to the West. Successful invasion of Normandy, the Western Front would collapse, leaving the Allies with little hope of reclaiming Europe. In this scenario, the war ends with a decisive German victory, forcing the remaining Allied nations into surrender or negotiation. With victory secured, the Third Reich would establish its new order across Europe. The continent would be reshaped to serve the interests of Nazi Germany, with the brutal regime enforcing its ideology through fear and violence. Eastern Europe would undergo the most drastic transformation. The Nazis' policy of Lebensraum or living space would see forced relocation, enslavement, and extermination of millions of people, particularly slaves, Jews, and other groups deemed undesirable by the regime. The Holocaust, already a catastrophic event, would expand in this alternate timeline. Without Allied intervention, the genocide would continue unabated, claiming millions more lives. Entire populations would be erased, their land repurposed for German settlers and the Nazi infrastructure. Western Europe, including France, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia, would be governed by the collaborationist regimes under the strict Nazi control. Resistance movement would be systematically crushed, and any remnants of democratic institutions would be dismantled. The cultural and political landscape of Europe would be reshaped to fit Nazi ideals with an emphasis on Aryan supremacy and militarism. Hitler's vision for Berlin, reimagined as Germania, would become a reality, a sprawling metropolis symbolizing the power and dominance of the Third Reich. This new capital would be a hub of Nazi ideology, its architecture designed to intimidate and inspire. Other cities across Europe would follow suit, transform into centers of Nazi power and culture. The fall of the United Kingdom would have a profound implications not just for Europe but for the entire British Empire. With Britain defeated, its vast colonial holdings would be vulnerable to Axis ambitions. In Africa, German and Italian forces would seize control of former British colonies, expanding their influence across the continent. South Africa, Egypt, and other strategic locations would become a key prizes in the post-war division of spoils. The Suez Canal, a critical artery for global trade, would fall under Axis control, giving them unprecedented power over global commerce. In Asia, the British Raj would be destabilized by the combined pressure of Japanese expansion and internal resistance. Japan, having established dominance over the Pacific, would extend its control over India, Burma, and Malaya. The independence movements in these regions, already gaining momentum, might either be crushed by the Axis or co-opted to serve their interests. The British Empire, the once the world's largest, would be dismantled. Its former territories would be divided among the Axis powers, with local populations subjected to harsh rule and exploitation. The geopolitical landscape of the 20th century would be radically altered, with Axis-controlled territories stretching from Europe to Africa and Asia and beyond. Across the Atlantic, the United States would face an unprecedented challenge. With Europe and much of Asia under Axis control, America's role as a global superpower would be under threat. This isolationist sentiment that had lingered before the Pearl Harbor might resurface, with the American public and leadership divided on how to respond to the Axis threat. In this alternate reality, the US might be forced into a difficult decision: continue the fight against the overwhelming odds or seek a negotiated peace with the Axis powers. With Britain defeated and the Soviet Union dismantled, America could find itself increasingly isolated on the world stage. The threat would not just be military. The Nazi regime, through propaganda and covert operations, could attempt to influence American politics, fostering isolationist and even fascist movement within the US. The idea of America first might take on a much darker connotation in this world, as some Americans could have been swayed by the Nazi ideology, leading to a rise in domestic extremism and authoritarianism. However, not all Americans would bow to the pressure. Underground resistance movements could emerge, fighting against the growing influence of the Axis powers and defending the core value of democracy and freedom. This could lead to a prolonged internal struggle, with America divided between those who resist the Axis and those who collaborate. The United States, once a beacon of democracy, could find itself in a bitter civil conflict, fighting to preserve the identity in a world dominated by the totalitarian regimes. The outcome of this struggle would shape the future of not only the US but the entire world. The Axis victory would have profound consequences for the entire globe. In Asia, Japan would dominate the Pacific, establishing its greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. This vast empire would extend across the East Asia and the Pacific, exploiting the region's resources and the people to fuel Japan's military and economic ambitions. China, having already suffered under Japanese occupation, would be further subjugated, with the puppet state of Manchukuo expanding its influence. The horror of the Nanking massacre would be repeated on an even larger scale, with millions of Chinese subjugated to forced labor, starvation, and brutal repressions. India, a crown jewel of the British Empire, would face a dramatically different future. In our timeline, the Axis power, particularly Japan, sought to exploit the growing Indian independence movement. The Subhash Chandra Bose, a prominent nationalist leader from the Indian National Army (INA), and aligned with Japan, hoping to liberate India from British rule. In this alternate history, with Britain defeated, Bose's vision might have been realized. Japan is seeing an opportunity to weaken the British influence, which support the INA's effort to take control of India. With Japanese backing, Bose could have led a successful campaign to overthrow British colonial rule, establishing a new government in India. However, the reality of Axis occupation would be far from the liberation many Indians hoped for. While Bose's government might have achieved permanent independence from Britain, it would likely remain heavily influenced by the Japan and broader Axis power. India could become a satellite state with its resources and people exploited to serve the Axis war effort. Bose, a leader with a vision for free and independent India, would find himself in a difficult position, balancing his nationalist goals with the demand of the Axis allies. The INA's struggle for independence would come at a high cost, with India caught between the promise of the freedom and the harsh reality of the Axis control. The long-term consequences for India could be severe. Japan's influence, combined with the exploitation of India's vast resources, would lead to widespread poverty, repression, and unrest. The dream of an independent India might turn into a nightmare of foreign domination, as the country becomes yet another piece in the Axis powers' global empire. Beyond the geopolitical change, an Axis victory would have a profound impact on culture, science, and society. The Nazi regime, with its rigid control over every aspect of life, would stifle creativity, innovation, and intellectual freedom. In the arts, only work that aligned with Nazi and Axis ideologies would be permitted. Modernism, abstract art, and any form of expression deemed degenerate would be banned, replaced by sterile propagandistic style that glorify the state and its leader. In Asia, Japan's culture and influence would dominate, pushing traditional Japanese aesthetic while suppressing local cultures and expressions across its empire. In science and technology, the Axis power would push their own agenda, focusing on projects that serve their military and ideological goals. The horror of human experimentation, already a dark chapter in the history, would likely expand under unchecked Axis rule. Advanced in technology would be driven by the desire for military superiority, with ethical considerations sidelined in favor of ruthless efficiency. The space race, a defining aspect of the post-war era in our timeline, might take on much darker tone. Instead of a competition between the superpowers for peaceful exploration, the Axis power could see space as the next battlefield, developing advanced rocketry and weapons systems with the intent of dominating the world and beyond. Education too would be transformed. Schools and universities would become tools of indoctrination, teaching the next generation to revere the state and its leader. Critical thinking and design would be suppressed, replaced by a rigid curriculum designed to produce loyal, unquestioning citizens. The intellectual freedom that has driven human progress for centuries would be severely curtailed. Despite the overwhelming power of the Axis, resistance would not disappear across the globe. From the streets of the Paris to the jungle of Southeast Asia, people would continue to fight for their freedom. Underground movements, guerrilla warfare, and act of defiance would challenge the Axis power at every turn. In Europe, the spirit of resistance would endure, with underground movements coordinating effort to disrupt Axis control. The French resistance, the Polish partitions, and the other group would continue their struggle even as the Nazis tightened their grip on the continent. Their fight would be a long and brutal one, with victory far from certain. In India, while both INA might have initially supported the Axis, other resistance groups would continue to fight for true independence, free from both British and Japanese domination. The struggle for India's future would become a complex and bloody conflict, with different factions vying for control and the support of the population. Across Africa and Latin America, resistance would also flare up against Axis-aligned regimes. The exploitation and oppression of local populations would fuel anger and resentment, leading to uprisings and rebellions. These struggles would be marked by severe repression, with the Axis power using all means at their disposal to maintain control. The world dominated by the totalitarian regime would be in a constant state of tension. The struggle for freedom and self-determination would be ongoing, with resistance movement facing overwhelming odds but refusing to surrender. The fight against the Axis power would not just be a military one, but a battle for the very soul of humanity. In this alternate world where the Axis powers emerged victorious, humanity would face a future dominated by the fear, oppression, and exploitation. The dream of a free and democratic world would be under constant threat, with the force of fascism holding sway over much of the globe. But even in the darkest of times, the human spirit endures. The drive for freedom, justice, and dignity cannot be easily extinguished. Across the world, people would continue to fight for their rights, their cultures, and their future. The struggle against tyranny would become the defining conflict of this new era. History is full of what ifs, but one thing remains clear: the boys we make, the battle we fight, and the ideals we uphold shape the world for generations to come. In the end, it's our collective will to resist oppression and fight for a better future that defines us as a species. Thank you for joining us on this journey through an alternate history. If you enjoyed this exploration, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dive into the pivotal moments that have shaped our world and the world that could have been.